My husband kicked me out because my daughter got pregnant in 11th grade. And 22 years later, he sued me. He thought he was fighting for justice. What he didn't know was that I'd been preparing for that battle since the night he slammed the door. Stay till the end. Because what started as humiliation became a masterclass in quiet revenge, built one heartbreak, one sleepless night, and one perfect move at a time. The night it happened, rain smeared the windows like the world itself was crying for me. I can still hear the echo of his voice, sharp, final, laced with disgust. You and that girl are not my responsibility anymore. Then the sound of the latch, the lock turning. It wasn't just a door closing. It was a lifetime slamming shut. I stood on that porch barefoot, holding my daughter's trembling hand, her backpack hanging half open with school papers spilling into puddles. The Texas night pressed down, humid, thick, heavy with shame. I remember whispering, "We'll be okay," even though I didn't believe it. We walked until my legs gave out, finding shelter under the awning of a closed diner. That was where I decided I'd never let anyone make me powerless again. Austin's streets were cruel to a single mother with nothing. I worked odd jobs, cleaned tables, scrubbed motel floors. My hands cracked from bleach. My back screamed from exhaustion, but I learned to move in silence, to observe, to study, to plan. Pain became my teacher. Then came Kayla Rhodes. 72 years old, wealthy, sharp, the kind of woman who could make a room freeze with just her glance. She found me outside her boutique hotel one morning, shivering as I waited for the bus. "You look like you're done taking pity from the world," she said, handing me a coffee. "How about you start taking control instead?" That single act changed everything. Kayla became my mentor, my compass, my mirror. Her lessons were brutal but brilliant. Revenge isn't about rage, she'd say. It's about precision. You don't strike until they've forgotten you still know how to aim. She taught me how to read people, their tone, their posture, the flicker in their eyes that reveals fear. She trained me in business, like she was sharpening a blade, inventory management, hospitality psychology, contract loopholes. Every morning at her kitchen table, with the smell of lavender tea and the low hum of jazz, she turned me into someone who could no longer be broken. 22 years later, when the man who once discarded me showed up again, demanding his share, he didn't realize I'd already written the ending. He wasn't walking into a lawsuit, he was walking into a trap. I still remember the exact morning everything started to collapse. My daughter, Lily, was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands shaking as she held that little white stick. The silence between us was unbearable, only broken by the sound of the clock ticking above the stove. When the result appeared, her face went pale. "Mom, I messed up," she whispered. I didn't yell. I didn't even breathe for a moment. I just stared at her, seeing my younger self reflected back, terrified, ashamed, waiting to be condemned. "We'll figure it out," I told her. "No matter what, I'm not leaving you." But my husband, David, didn't share my resolve. When he found out, his reaction was instant, pure disgust. His voice thundered through the house. "Do you realize what this will do to us?" To me. He wasn't thinking about Lily's pain or the fear of a 17-year-old girl. He was thinking about reputation, appearances, his colleagues at the firm. He wanted her gone, or me gone for defending her. That night, I packed 2 suitcases. Mine and Lily's. I thought he'd stop me, that some part of the man I'd married would remember the vows he'd made. Instead, he held the door open and said, "If you leave, don't come back." So I didn't. The weeks that followed were a blur of survival, couch surfing, working double shifts at the diner, and pretending to be strong when Lily cried herself to sleep. The world judged us. whispered behind our backs, labeled us as failures. But I learned something powerful. Once you've been publicly humiliated, you become fearless. Because nothing left to lose means nothing left to fear. Then, just when life seemed unbearable, fate brought Kayla back into my orbit. She'd kept her promise from years ago, watching from a distance, waiting until I was ready to rise again. "Still standing," she said, showing up one afternoon at the diner with that same lavender perfume and a knowing smile. "Good. Let's get to work." She offered me a job at one of her downtown hotels, starting small, hostessing in the lobby. From there, she groomed me for management, teaching me how to spot opportunity in chaos. Her lessons weren't about revenge anymore. They were about strategy. How to wield control without showing your hand. How to turn every insult into leverage. Kayla used to tell me, "When the people who broke you return, don't meet them with tears. Meet them with evidence." Those words became my creed, because I knew, deep down, David's world would eventually crumble. And when it did, he'd come crawling back, not for forgiveness, but for what I'd built without him. And when that day came, I'd be ready. Kayla's world was nothing like mine. Her house stood on a quiet street lined with magnolias, their scent heavy in the Texas heat. Inside, everything gleamed: marble counters, mahogany shelves stacked with ledgers, and the faint sound of old jazz humming from a record player in the corner. It didn't feel like home. It felt like command central. "Every empire starts with structure," she told me on my first morning there. "You can't fight chaos with chaos, Chelsea. You fight it with order." Those words became my mantra. Kayla didn't hand out charity. She handed out challenges. I started as a hostess at her downtown hotel, the Rhodes Regency, greeting guests with a practiced smile while watching everything. How they moved, how they complained, who they tipped, who they ignored. Kayla made me keep a journal of patterns, human behavior, as data points. "Revenge," she'd say, "isn't emotion. It's information." Within a year, I was assistant manager. By 2, I was running operations on my own. Kayla would walk through the lobby like a queen inspecting her kingdom, her cane tapping rhythmically against the marble. "What do you see?" she'd ask. "I see power disguised as hospitality," I'd answer. She'd grin. "Good girl." But her lessons went far beyond business. Over long nights with coffee and contracts spread across her dining table, she taught me the art of legal protection, trusts, wills, asset management. She introduced me to her attorney, Sean Barrett, a quiet man with sharp eyes who spoke in strategies, not words. He showed me how to seal assets so no one could touch them. "Never let your future hang in someone else's hands," he told me. It wasn't just mentorship anymore. It was armor being forged. Kayla also made me confront pain instead of avoiding it. "You can't build power on fear," she'd say. "Face it, analyze it, then turn it into a blueprint." So I faced everything: the nights on the park bench, the sting of David's voice, the ache of Lily's tears. And with every remembered wound, I grew sharper. Then came the day Kayla handed me a small box tied with a silver ribbon. Inside was a key. "Your own property," she said. "Downtown office space. You've earned it." That key symbolized more than a building. It was my transformation from discarded wife to self-made force. And by the time Lily graduated college, our lives had shifted entirely. We had a name, a company, and influence. I'd built something that couldn't be taken from me. Kayla would sometimes look at me with pride, but also warning. "Remember, child, power attracts ghosts. One day, they'll come knocking again." I smiled, sipping my coffee. Good. Let them, because by then, I'd already started planning what I'd do when they did. It started with an envelope, thick, cream-colored. embossed with gold lettering that reeked of arrogance. I found it on my desk one Monday morning, wedged between business proposals and vendor contracts. The return address read, David Mathers and Associates. My hand froze. 22 years of silence. And now this. I slid it open with the letter opener Kayla had gifted me years ago, her initials still etched on the handle like a reminder of everything I'd become. Inside was a legal notice, concise and cold. David Mathers is filing for partial ownership of the Norton Group on behalf of his biological child's contribution to its growth and success. My pulse didn't race. It slowed. The audacity almost made me laugh. He wasn't just back. He was coming for what I built. I sat back in my leather chair, the skyline of Austin stretching behind me, sunlight flashing off glass towers that bore my name. He'd left me and Lily with nothing. Now he wanted a slice of everything. I poured myself a glass of water, letting the silence of the office amplify the storm brewing inside. So it begins, I whispered. That night, I called Sean and Shannon. Sean handled the legal armor. Shannon, the IT strategist Kayla had introduced me to, handled the invisible war. Intercept every email, every file, every digital footprint he touches, I told her. She didn't ask why. She just smirked. Time to play? Time to win. Days later, David's lawyer sent a follow-up. Claims about paternal rights, moral image, legacy. He spoke like a man desperate to rewrite history. What he didn't know was that I'd already started scripting the ending. While his team scrambled to gather proof of his connection to our success, Shannon tracked their searches. Forums, legal loopholes, even private investigator queries. Every click they made was a breadcrumb. Every word they wrote became evidence. Meanwhile, I crafted my performance, a carefully rehearsed act of shock and vulnerability. When David finally called, his tone was casual, almost condescending. Chelsea, he said, we don't have to make this ugly. We can resolve this like adults. I let my voice tremble just enough. I don't understand why you'd do this after so long. He sighed like a man burdened by regret. I just want what's fair. For Lily. For all of us. But I knew better. Lily's name was a prop. His greed was the plot. After the call, Shannon sent me a transcript of his private messages, threads of desperation with investors, talks of debt, and one line that sealed his fate. She's sitting on millions she doesn't deserve. I printed that line, framed it, and set it on my desk like a trophy. He thought he'd found a crack in my armor. What he didn't see was that I'd spent 2 decades forging a sword, and he'd just handed me the perfect reason to use it. The first rule Kayla ever taught me was simple. Never fight fire with fire. Let them burn themselves. So I did. David's arrogance was my matchstick. All I had to do was hand him the flame. Shannon and I began feeding subtle misinformation through channels we knew his team monitored. Public filings, anonymous tips, and leaked press chatter about a potential merger involving my company. We made it look tempting, the perfect opportunity for him to overreach. Within a week, the bait caught. His assistant sent an email to one of our fake contacts asking about investment entry points and pre-merger stakes. Shannon intercepted it before it even reached their server's backup. I smiled when I saw the timestamp. Midnight. Desperation never sleeps. Meanwhile, I played the role of the overwhelmed single mother. In court filings, in every public interaction, I let myself appear hesitant, tired, sympathetic. It disarmed them. She's emotional, they whispered. She'll settle. That's exactly what I wanted. While they saw weakness, Sean and I were stacking walls of legal steel around every asset I owned. We froze access to trusts, transferred holdings, and sealed contracts with timestamps that made every move look years old. He couldn't touch a cent. Then I started turning the public eye. A quiet feature story appeared in a local business magazine, authored by a journalist I'd mentored years back, about women who rebuilt after betrayal. The headline alone did half the work. She was left with nothing. Now she owns the city. I didn't have to name names. Everyone who mattered knew who it was about. David's calls came more frequently after that, his tone shifting from calm to cornered. "You're making me look bad," he snapped once. I let silence hang, then replied, "You did that on your own. Every word recorded, every pause intentional." Shannon's digital trail revealed cracks in his camp. His lawyer's junior associate was leaking documents for side cash. We traced payments, mirrored accounts, and captured everything. "Got him," Shannon said one night, spinning her chair toward me with a grin. "He's funding his case with investor money." I looked at the screen, at the bank transfers blinking red, and felt the old ache of betrayal twist into satisfaction. "Perfect," I said. "Let him keep digging." By the end of that month, David's narrative was collapsing. His supposed evidence was disproven line by line. Fabrications, outdated records, falsified signatures. Sean filed a counterclaim so airtight that their own counsel asked for a settlement conference. But I wasn't ready to end it yet. Revenge without exposure isn't justice. It's mercy. So I waited. Because the best part of a trap isn't when it closes. It's the moment your prey finally realizes there's no way out. Word travels fast in Austin's business circles, especially when money and ego are involved. Within days, whispers about David's lawsuit started spreading. Every version of the story made him look weaker. Some said he was after his ex-wife's fortune. Others claimed he'd gambled away his firm's assets and was clawing for a bailout. I didn't have to correct anyone. I just watched. Lies have momentum when you let them roll downhill. Shannon and I worked quietly behind the scenes, tightening every bolt. She released carefully timed anonymous leaks to local reporters, emails showing David's firm paying for private investigators to dig into my finances. Nothing illegal, just unethical enough to stink. Journalists devoured it. Headlines like "Lawyer crosses line in personal case and conflict of interest clouds Mather's lawsuit" hit the feeds by Friday morning. By Monday, 2 of his biggest clients had pulled out. His firm's board started whispering about damage control, and David, true to form, began making mistakes. He sent me messages late at night, half threats, half pleas. "You think you're untouchable," one read. Another, hours later, "We can fix this if you stop now." I didn't reply. Each one went straight into the evidence file. Meanwhile, Lily was watching everything unfold from the sidelines. She'd grown into a fierce, brilliant woman, her mother's daughter in every way. "Mom," she said one evening, scrolling through the latest headlines, "he's unraveling." I nodded. "And he doesn't even see who's pulling the thread." Then came the betrayal from within his own ranks. Shannon intercepted a conversation between David's partner, Russell, and one of their top investors. Russell was panicking, trying to distance the firm from David's scandal. "He's unstable," Russell said. "We're considering suspension." That was all I needed. Sean drafted a motion citing their internal doubts about David's credibility. It hit the court the next morning. When David saw it, he exploded. He stormed into my office unannounced, face red, eyes wild. Security didn't even have time to react before he was standing across from me, fists clenched. "You think you've won?" he shouted. "You've poisoned everyone against me." I stood calmly, the same way Kayla once had when people tried to intimidate her. "No, David," I said softly. "You did that all by yourself." His eyes flickered, confusion mixing with fear. Because he realized, too late, that I wasn't angry. I was in control. He stormed out moments later, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. But as soon as he left, Sean stepped from the adjoining conference room where he'd been quietly recording everything. "Got it all," he said. I smiled, exhaling slowly. "Good. Let's give him one more chance to destroy himself in public this time." The Austin Business Summit was the biggest event of the year, streamed live, packed with reporters, investors, and every name that mattered. My company had been chosen to host a keynote on ethical leadership in modern entrepreneurship. The irony wasn't lost on me, neither was the timing. David had petitioned the court for an emergency hearing that same week, hoping to prove ownership ties through moral contribution. He wanted attention. I'd give it to him. When I stepped onto the stage that afternoon, lights blazing, cameras flashing, I could feel him in the crowd. Second row, center aisle, arms crossed, trying to look composed. I began my speech slowly, deliberately. "Integrity," I said, "isn't about what people say when things go well. It's about what they do when the truth costs them everything." The room quieted. I caught David's smirk fade. Behind me, the screen lit up with a presentation my team had prepared. Case studies, testimonials, philanthropic projects. Then the final slide appeared. A document, projected larger than life, bearing his signature. David Mathers, Formal Relinquishment of Financial Rights, dated 2003. Gasps rippled through the audience. I turned slightly toward the screen. This document was filed the same year I was left with nothing. It states, in his own hand, that he surrendered all claims to my assets, present and future, and yet, I gestured toward him, some people still try to rewrite history when success finally belongs to the one they underestimated. David shot up, shouting, "That's not what this is! You're twisting everything." Cameras swung to him instantly. The moderators tried to calm him, but he kept going, ranting about lies, betrayal, fairness. Every word dug his grave deeper. Sean, sitting in the front row, quietly handed a folder to a journalist beside him. Copies of the same signed documents, along with court filings and intercepted communications. Within minutes, phones buzzed across the room as the press pushed the story live. Attorney exposed for false claims against ex-wife. David froze as he realized what was happening. The room that once looked at him with respect now looked at him like a spectacle, his face drained of color, jaw tightening as whispers swirled. "You can't do this," he muttered, almost to himself. "Oh, I already did," I said calmly into the mic, never breaking eye contact. Security approached him when he refused to sit down. Cameras caught every second. The confrontation, the removal, the stunned faces. By the time he was escorted out, the live feed had hit over 1 million views. His reputation, his firm, his legacy, gone before he even reached the door. When the applause finally came, it wasn't loud. It was steady, deliberate, like the sound of judgment. And as the lights dimmed, I whispered to myself the words Kayla had once told me. Justice is best served when they see it coming too late. The fallout was instant and merciless. Within 24 hours, the video from the summit dominated every major newsfeed. Clips of David shouting, the signed document flashing behind him, and security escorting him out became the #1 trending story in Austin. Hashtags erupted, hashtag Justice for Chelsea, hashtag The Mathers Meltdown, hashtag Don't Cross the Queen. I didn't post a thing. I didn't need to. The world did my talking for me. By the end of the week, David's law firm announced his voluntary resignation. Insiders leaked that it wasn't voluntary at all. His partners forced him out to salvage what was left of their reputation. Clients withdrew, endorsements evaporated, and the firm's stock value nosedived overnight. His name, once synonymous with prestige, became a cautionary tale in every corporate gossip thread. Meanwhile, Sean made sure our counterclaims moved fast. He filed motions for damages, citing emotional distress, defamation, and harassment. The evidence was airtight: his emails, his recorded rants, his lawyer's misconduct. Within a month, the judge dismissed his suit and sanctioned him for wasting court resources. The irony was delicious. He'd sued me to reclaim what he thought he'd lost, and ended up paying me instead. But victory didn't feel loud. It felt quiet, clean, final. There was no satisfaction in watching a man drown in the consequences he poured himself. There was only peace. I didn't celebrate with champagne or a headline. I went home, sat by the window, and watched the city lights blink against the Texas dusk. Lily joined me, placing her head on my shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. I smiled faintly. "No, we did. We survived him." Still, karma wasn't done. Shannon's contacts uncovered that David had funneled firm money into personal accounts. That discovery triggered a federal audit. By the time investigators closed in, his assets were frozen, his reputation obliterated. Rumors spread that he'd moved to Scottsdale, living in a rented condo far from the skyline he once bragged about. And me? I didn't chase any more battles. I built bridges instead, literal ones, between women who had faced what I once did. The Kayla Rhodes Foundation for Women became my next empire. We provided housing, scholarships, and mentorships for single mothers rebuilding their lives. Every donation, every story felt like closing another wound. At the foundation's launch, I stood before a room full of women who had been told they'd never make it. "You don't need revenge to win," I said. "You just need to rise high enough that they can't reach you anymore." The crowd applauded. But what caught my eye was Lily in the front row, tears glistening, pride in her smile. She was my proof that strength can be inherited not through blood, but through example. 2 months after the chaos faded, I found myself standing in Kayla's old study. The scent of her lavender still lingered in the air, faint but unmistakable, like she never really left. Her portrait hung above the fireplace, her eyes painted with the same quiet authority that had once rebuilt my life. "I kept your promise," I whispered. They learned. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of the city outside. I'd inherited this house after Kayla passed, every corner filled with her wisdom. The mahogany desk still held the silver key she'd given me all those years ago, now tarnished but sacred. That key had unlocked not just a building, but a destiny. I placed it back inside the drawer and closed it gently. I didn't need symbols anymore. My life had become one. Lily was thriving. Her tech startup, ironically named Rhodes Link in honor of Kayla, had just secured its first major contract with one of the biggest hotel chains in Texas. "You built the foundation," she told me one morning over coffee. "I just expanded it." Watching her speak in boardrooms with that same calm precision I'd learned decades ago filled me with pride. She'd taken every lesson, strength, discipline, dignity, and woven them into her own future. Sometimes people ask if I ever forgave David. I tell them forgiveness isn't always freedom. It's sometimes offense. It keeps bitterness from wandering back into your heart, but it doesn't let the past roam free either. I don't hate him anymore. He became what he always feared most: irrelevant. And there's no revenge more complete than indifference. A few months later, I received a letter. Handwritten, unmarked, shaky script. It was from him. "Chelsea, I lost everything. I don't expect forgiveness, just peace. You were right about everything. I should have stayed." I read it once, folded it neatly, and placed it in a box with old photos and Kayla's will. Then I locked it away. That chapter was closed. The past can keep its ghosts. Life had a rhythm again, steady, measured, almost gentle. I spent my mornings running foundation meetings, my afternoons at the cafe Kayla once loved, mentoring young women who reminded me of myself. Every story I heard was another reminder of how far I'd come, from sleeping under awnings in Austin rain to building an empire that no storm could shake. One afternoon, during a scholarship ceremony, a girl no older than Lily had been when this all began asked, "How did you do it? How did you keep going when everything fell apart?" I smiled. By realizing that survival isn't the end goal, transformation is. She nodded, but I could tell she didn't fully understand yet. She would, one day. Pain teaches slowly, but permanently. Later that evening, as the event wrapped up, I stood outside under the same Texas sky that once watched me crumble. The air was warm, the cicadas humming like they were reciting an old story. I thought of Kayla, of Lily, of every version of me that had fought, broken, rebuilt. The girl who'd been kicked out, the mother who'd been shamed, the woman who'd been underestimated, all of them were standing there with me, in the quiet. And for the first time there was no bitterness left, just gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that shaped me, the people who believed in me, and the justice that came without me having to chase it anymore. I visited Kayla's grave that weekend, a small headstone under an oak tree outside Austin. I placed a single lavender flower at its base. "You were right," I whispered. "Revenge wasn't the goal. It was the lesson." As I turned to leave, the wind stirred through the trees, carrying the faintest scent of her perfume. I smiled through tears. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe not. When I got back home, I found Lily waiting on the porch, a letter in her hand. "What's this?" I asked. She smiled. "A grant proposal from a high school senior who wants to build shelters for teen mothers." She said your story inspired her. My throat tightened. "Then let's fund her," I said softly. And in that moment, I realized the full circle had closed. My story had begun with a door slamming shut and ended with one opening for someone else. Justice wasn't the lawsuit, or the headlines, or even the empire I'd built. It was this, breaking the cycle, giving others the chance I was once denied. That night, as I locked the office, I caught my reflection in the glass door, older, calmer, unshakable. I thought of the woman I'd become and whispered to her the words I wished someone had told me at 19. "You were never broken. You were just in progress." The city lights flickered across the skyline, and I breathed deep, letting it all go. The pain, the anger, the need for vindication. All that remained was power, quiet, and earned. Revenge, I realized, had never been the point. Becoming untouchable was.